The key things we're always looking at is first, what is our clinical question that we're seeking literature to answer for us? Um, for example, how am I going to teach this? Um, how am I going to do functional communication training? How am I going to teach them a replacement behavior? If that's kind of an ABA principle. Then we're going to look for research on how specific interventions that are designed to address a specific problem. Sometimes we get in trouble by not figuring out the question first and going to the literature first, and you forget why you're even looking in the literature in the first place. So get that question first. Then you do have to evaluate the quality of the evidence. You have to consider the student and family and whether the evidence is showing it works with that kind of student and family, excuse me. Then personal and agency factors. This is going to come into play, hopefully not too often, but occasionally when a specific intervention requires resources that you don't have already, and you have to consider if even if if an evidence-based intervention isn't one realistically that you're going to be allowed to use in the setting you're teaching, then you got to integrate that evidence and more importantly, again, evaluate it. It's not enough to do something and say it's an evidence-based practice. When you're doing your progress reports and you're reviewing your goal and your data, if they're not making progress, no matter if it's evidence-based or not, you should, that's it's not working. And so you have to constantly evaluate the outcomes, and it's not fair to the child to lean on, well, it's an evidence-based practice. If they're not making progress, it's not working for them. And so we gotta evaluate the outcomes and not just assume because it's evidence based that that's what the child needs to learn the skill. We talk about developmental and functional approaches in intervention just in general. If we look at these kind of spectrums here, we have developmental to functional versus structured all the way down to naturalistic. So, a developmental approach would teach skills in a typically developed sequence. That's kind of how most speech pathologists are trained. And we avoid using them to deny help if the child is missing a prerequisite skill. So, even though we use that, we don't use it against the child, and that if they're missing a prerequisite skill, we don't say that we don't think that they could do other things on that developmental pathway. A functional approach is maybe more what we'd consider that behavioral modification approach and is appropriate too. It helps them immediately through drill and reinforcement. It definitely can build some behavior momentum through success. Uh, at times, the issue is noted to be their generalization of the skill. So you can kind of see where developmental and structured meet, and then as they go away, um, they go to naturalistic and functional. I think that you have to consider each kid. Easier said than done. I know I say that a lot, but you'll be surprised how once you've done it for a while, it's easy to just kind of find yourself writing the same thing over and over and planning the same thing. And so you just kind of consider this as a spectrum and what kind of approach to language intervention would work best for this student. What do you want to advocate for? Here's specific examples of structured versus naturalistic methods, and we've talked about these to some degree already, but a structured method would be direct instruction or discrete trial teaching. Remember whenever you did the example of them saying you're holding the ball and you want them to say ball, you immediately give them the ball and praise them, and then you take the ball back and then you hold the ball and they say ball, and it's very drill. It's very standardized and it has highly laid out specific instructions and materials. But sometimes that's the one that's hard for kids to move from that very rote drill facilitation of the goal to the actual real world environment. They're sitting at the table and can tell you it's a ball, but when they go out to recess, would they tell you there's a ball? And there's naturalistic methods that are very much more like these incidental teaching, and you're very much using the child's lead and reinforcing based on their preference, and so it's much less likely to occur at a table sitting across from each other. However, a difficult part about this is sometimes goals are goals, and your goals drive your instruction. You don't just teach the goals on your IEP, but you have to report on them, definitely. And so sometimes if you spend the whole quarter just kind of doing child-led therapy, you could get to the point where it's time to report on that goal and you think, I don't know, I wasn't able to get targeted data on that. And so there is a place and a time and a space for both methods for all kids. And so just remembering that they both have to be on the radar. It was interesting though that they tried to figure out which one has the most efficacy, is the most efficient, effective rather, it for children that have phonological or vocabulary difficulties, and just trying to say, okay, so which approach is generally most effective depending on a disability. They're going to say that naturalistic approaches are more effective for those kids with the more severe language issues, and the highly structured are the most effective for the less severe language issues, or needed less support. And I feel like that's counterintuitive. I feel like when I was first thinking about it, I would think the more severely that they have a need, the more intense kind of drill-based instruction they need. But when you think about it, what it's actually like working with those kids, you don't really get drill-based instruction. It's not even really possible to the same extent. And so it's very much more naturalistic versus that highly structured, like in the case of discrete trial teaching, that's going to come with kids who have needs, less supportive needs. And then, as in all intervention, including language, for the speech pathologist and you as the teacher, the special education teacher, we have to remember they're not going to be kids forever. We got to begin with the end in mind, meaning where they're going to end up. And so we got to help them generalize these skills, teaching in natural environments, using a variety of materials and tasks, using a variety of communication partners, different teachers, different peers, teaching skills demanded by their direct environment, because that will allow them to immediately start practicing if it's already in their direct environment. And then using as many naturally reinforcing things as possible. And we'll all just help generalize it. Collaboration. I think this is I'm going to check here. This is one of my last slides. Yeah, it is. I feel like, again, this seems like you've probably been told this 100 different ways by this point in your training, your teacher training. But it is magic. This is another thing that we can't discount or discredit. We have to not only collaborate with that child and their family, but with the team at the school. And so that's going to require a certain amount of personal commitment, because not everyone else might share that belief. That's going to require some brave, some crucial conversations, and some, what do they call those now? Guys, for real, Friday. I'm going to keep blaming it on Friday. But you're going to have some communication skills for sure. You're going to have, it will help you to have a set interaction process in place, whether that's in the form of how you have regular meetings occurring, or the chain of command. If there are issues, you want to have that in place. And then, of course, your programming and your services, that clarity around what that looks like and what the expectation is across the team, and a context. And you remember that this team is not just the specialists and yourself, the teachers in your building, but the child's parents as well, and the child, very much the child. Lastly, is this activity for you to go in and review an instructional plan from Sarah. And then I want you to tell me 2 more additional instructions that could enhance Sarah's language and/or literacy skills. And here's the case study. It's in your book. What page is that on? 220 and 221. So definitely do this to solidify some of what we talked about. Put it into practice. Case studies are incredibly effective for that. And then make sure you're checking out and completing the chapter 13 and 14 quiz. You're working on your assignments for the week and emailing me with questions or concerns about anything we talked about. If you're going through some of these activities, I'm trying to pause and give you time to do, even though we're not together. Email me that. Email me, say, hey, this is what I came up with. Is this right or wrong? I understand if you want feedback. So I'm definitely here for that. And we only have 2 more chapters left. So we are nearing the end for sure. And I'll see you for chapter 15.